Hello, I've been teaching myself to cable knit, and I'm not an expert, but I'm feeling pretty good about how far I've come. And I thought I might share a roundup of all the free patterns I use to teach myself. I always try and learn something new with free patterns just because I don't want to spend money on something and then find out that I hate the technique or whatever. And I always start off in quite chunky wool and go for the most basic thing possible. So you're going to kind of see an evolution as I share these patterns of ones that start out being quite big, quite basic, and then by the end I feel like I was attempting some pretty complicated stuff. I had attempted cable knitting before and it hadn't really gone very well, and I think that's because I was learning from a written pattern, whereas in retrospect I think I needed a video just to work out where to put my hands, how to hold the needle, all of that stuff. Saw a few people saying actually cable knitting's really easy, and apparently that was all I needed to hear to be like, okay, cool. It just completely erased my previous experience from my mind. Confidence is back. I'm going to give this a go. I don't remember any of the names of any of the patterns or the designers for this. They're going to be up on screen next to me, and I'll show you a picture of the finished object as well. The very first pattern that I tried was this pair of fingerless gloves, and it was a video tutorial. I did it in chunky wool, so it grew quite quickly, and it was just really, really easy to follow along with. The cable's really big. So it took me a little, like I've been knitting for a while before it started to look like a cable. And that was a good first early lesson of like a lot of cabling doesn't start to actually look like something until you've been doing it for a while. Because I was pulling it back a few times and thinking, I must have done something wrong. This doesn't look like anything. And then I was like, oh, I need to do the cable repeat a few times before it looks like something. Like these gloves, like this pattern, recommend it. After that, I went for another video pattern, and this was for this cowl, which the designer did in big tweed acrylic, and I did in much thinner acrylic, which once again I was just pulling stuff out of my stash to do. In retrospect, I should have done the thicker acrylic, at least something to match the big tweed. Sorry if this is upsetting for any North Americans. I think Joann's used to sell it, and I think them going out of business, it seems to have been a big thing on social media for you guys. But yeah, basically it should have matched the gauge, because the one I came up with was a lot thinner and a lot tighter, but actually I don't wear cowls, and I do like a good headband to keep my ears warm in the cold, so that's how I've been wearing this. And I think it turned out really well. I did it on size 4 needles, like the gloves I'd done on a size 8, and these I did in a size 4. And considering I did this basically in the car driving home for Christmas, I feel pretty good about it, and the tension is pretty good. The pattern is fit in the round, and I did it flat because I find it easier to knit flat. I should have done it in the round, really. Like, it's got a big old seam at the back and everything. But overall, I think it's really consistent. It came up as like my triumph, one of my triumphs for January in my triumphs and disasters video. And yeah, it really gave me a lot of confidence. And I spent most of Christmas like just yelling through to my mum in the front room, like, Mum, come and look. Do you see how much I'm cabling here? And she's a knitter as well. So she like understood why that was a big deal and everything for me. So that was cute. And then after this, I thought I would attempt bobbles, which I know are not cable, but so many cable patterns involve a bobble, which I'm never completely comfortable with knitting. The reason I'm not comfortable knitting them is because I was never really sure what the stitches I was doing were doing, if that makes sense. So I was like, okay, but why am I purling here? Why am I knitting here? It wasn't intuitive to me whenever I tried to knit bobbles. So I decided to try and make these mittens by Bernat. It was a process, and I think the finished result is very, very, very rough looking. Definitely not my best work, but I still feel pretty happy with them because it was while I was doing them that it really clicked for me. Like with the fingerless gloves, I felt I understood that I could do a cable, and with the cowl, I was like, okay, I can do like a lot of cables. And with the mittens, I was like, okay, I understand how these stitches impact each other, and I can do it a bit more intuitively. So if I lost my way on the pattern, I didn't need to just pull it all back and start again. I could look at it, look at what I had so far, and be like, do the kind of the equations in my head of working out, okay, I'm probably at this row here, which once again really helped for confidence. And it was an easy pattern. The thumb gussets are a bit of a mess on this one, but that's more I hadn't knitted a thumb gusset before, not anything reflecting the pattern itself. And then I did what ended up being one of my disasters for January, in that I attempted this hat, which I really like the pattern of the kind of upside down V's for this, and it looks super cozy and snuggly, and I decided I wanted to really get into cabling hats. I don't know why. I was like, this is it. I'm a cabler and I cable hats. Despite the fact that this is so far mainly been gloves. And the reason I really struggled with this is because the pattern doesn't provide a gauge. And normally I'm very much like, gauge smage. Like, let's just have a go. And no, I needed a gauge because I ended up with something that was massive. It had an intensely wide brim and it was very tall, and I had at least one too many columns of cables. And this was a little bit of a kind of grounding experience for me, because I think if you are an intermediate or advanced knitter who likes knitting the way I like knitting, where it's very much like the pattern is a kind of suggestion and then you just kind of like do whatever you want, this is a really good pattern. But I was not advanced yet enough to understand how wrong it was going until I basically made up the hat. And I realized some of that was just decisions I made with like the brim. Like I should have gone down 2 needle sizes with the brim. I had a commenter on a previous video point that out to me, and I was just like, yes, should have done that. Wish I'd done that. But also, I think if I had been more experienced with cables, I would have realized that I had one cable repeat too many, and I would have spotted the error sooner. So this was a little bit of a kind of, I'd felt pretty confident up until now, and then it's not necessarily a bad pattern. You need to be very confident to be able to read it. So that was a sobering moment. And I have since unraveled the hat, and I am going to use it for something, use the wool for another cable hat that includes a gauge in the pattern. And then I had another disaster right after that, once again featured in my January wrap up. Basically, I was making this cardigan. I think it's a design by Paintbox Yarns, and I found it on Lovecrafting. And I love how 90s this is. Like, I'm really going through a thing at the minute of just really loving the kind of late 80s, early 90s knitwear patterns. And I love the leaf kind of detailing on the raglan for this. It's kind of crossing over into that cable lace area. So I was really enjoying it. And it was a different construction to what I've normally done, because I got to the top of the sleeves when normally you would start decreasing. And suddenly it was like, okay, increase massively. And I was like, what? But it increased massively. And then as you knit the leaf, it slowly narrows the top of the sleeve. And I'd not seen that before, and I enjoyed it. I knitted the 2 halves of the front and the back and one of the sleeves, got to the second sleeve and realized I didn't have enough wool left. Like, I liked the wool, I liked the pattern, but I didn't like it enough to go out and buy more of the wool. I'm trying to like limit my buying this year a bit. I knew that I could knit a different jumper that I would get as much wear of, if not more. And then I had a third disaster, which once again is more on me and the decisions I have made rather than the pattern. So this is, it's a free pattern and it's available, but you have to do Google Translate on it. So technically it's free, but I'm going to link to the Ravelry page rather than the free version. And I got it in a book that I found in a charity shop. So it's baby cable knits. And I was like, yes, knitting baby stuff is so good when you're learning something new, you know, tiny things that knit up quite quickly. And I had a nephew born last month, and I was like, okay, right, I'm going to knit him this little cardigan. I really recommend this pattern in terms of it's such a nice stitch, and the cabling is so satisfying as you watch it come together. And I just love this little repeat leaf pattern. And right up until the armpits, I was like smashing this. I was like, oh my God, it's all come together, all the lessons I've learned. And then I got to the bit where you combine the arms and the body, and it's just a mess. And this was, I kind of fudged it in the end. I don't have a photo of it, but it kind of looked okay in the end. But this was such a kind of learning curve for me as well, in terms of a lot of the time I find, like, basically there was a lot of notes in the Ravelry that the arms ran quite thin and skinny, and I was like, babies have fat little arms, they don't want to be pinched. So I did what a lot of people were recommending, and I went up a size for the arms, like knitted the newborn for the body and then went to the 3 to 6 months for the arms, and it looked good, you know, but it meant that as I was starting to attach all the pieces, I had way more stitches on my needles than the pattern said I should have. And that's where it just all unraveled for me. I mean, not literally, like I finished the cardigan, it was fine. The experience of having to, like, normally if I have too many stitches on my needles, I would just do a few sneaky decreases, you know? But with this, like, how do you decrease in a cable pattern in a way that doesn't mess up the cabling when the pattern doesn't think you should be decreasing at the minute? That was just like, it melted my mind trying to work that out. And I got there in the end, and there is like one repeat that's very skinny in comparison to the others. But yeah, it was a very big lesson learned. If you are a confident knitter, you know, who's happy kind of making big adjustments to a pattern and stuff, this is a really good pattern to make. I love it. If I hadn't had such a nightmare with it, I probably honestly would make an adult version of it for myself, because I just enjoyed it so much. It was so satisfying the way it came together. But yeah, if you are not a confident knitter, look, admire, have this in the back burner for like a year down the line once you're more confident with cabling, because it's not a beginner one. And then the last one was my triumph. Like, I still can't believe that I managed to make this, and I can't believe I got through the process of making it as well. So it's called the Meadow Scarf. This one I remember because it is my pride and joy. And it's by a designer who I think is called Annabelle Williams. You get it by subscribing to her newsletter, and she does send out a lot of newsletters, I will say. So I mean, they're all nice. You know, it's not like a hard sell. It's quite a nice atmospheric newsletter, but just warning. It's this pattern that looks, I think it kind of looks like fruit. Like maybe, I want to say like a melon, maybe, repeat. I just really liked it. This was so well written as well. Like, I really, like, it's got videos. So this was the pattern where I learned how to cable without having to use a cable needle, which I loved. And basically, I've been cabling stuff since this pattern, like paid patterns. And I don't use a cable needle, and I'm really happy not to. And she includes a great video of how to do it. So I recommend downloading the pattern just to see that video, to be honest. But also, every line is written out of like this many knits, this many yarn overs, etc., etc. But she also has a chart. And this was the pattern where I really learned how to read a chart, which was great and felt really kind of like, oh, wow, I feel like I can level up now. So all of that was great. And I made this for my sister in the yellow because she's the one who had a baby recently. I made him a little knitted jacket in this yellow stuff. It's the Serta Snuggly. And I had some left over. So I was like, okay, I'll make her a little neckerchief type thing. So they can kind of do matching, but not too obviously matching outfits. But it's a superwash wool, and I do not recommend, and the pattern doesn't call for a superwash wool. And I had this wool because I was like, he's a baby, he's going to be sick on stuff. He's, you know, they want to be able to just chuck stuff in the washing machine and wash it immediately. Not the best for cabling though, is it? And I really learned a lesson with this because like the grey hat, which was a disaster, but I did it in the Fable by Yorkshire Spinners, and that was great because I think for cabling you do need a yarn that's got a bit of grip to it, which sounds really basic as I say it out loud, but honestly I've not seen that mentioned much anywhere. And yeah, super slippery yarn like the superwash that'll show up every single mistake. And in this scarf I feel like there are a few very obvious mistakes which are just so glaring because of the nature of the yarn, and also just like wrangling it on and off the needles felt quite difficult. So I recommend this pattern. I do not recommend using superwash yarn. The other issue I had with this pattern was on the decrease bit, suddenly the number of stitches the pattern said I should have changed quite dramatically. So it's like, okay, you're down to like 56 stitches. And then the next line said, and now you have 75 stitches. And I'm like, do I have 75 stitches? And I realized, and I thought it was me making a mistake, but no, it was just, there's an error with the pattern, and it's a free pattern, and free patterns have mistakes. Like that's one of the things that happens when it's a free pattern, and it doesn't detract from the pattern. But I had to, and you remember the saga of the cardigan where I was like, oh God, I need to like decrease all these stitches. I had to once again decrease all these stitches when the pattern was telling me I didn't need to. And I did it. The boost in my confidence it gave me. And it helped that I'd already, if it had been, that error had been in the increase section, I think I would have given up. But the fact that I'd already done all the increase and I'd knitted flat for a while, I was so familiar with the pattern at this point and I'd memorized it that I was just like, okay, I can sort of work this out. And I did, and I didn't have to rip it back at all. I just worked it out. Still a few little errors where I feel like I was like, you know, pulled my yarn over a bit tight and had to redo stuff and everything. But overall, just so good. I recommend this pattern if you've cabled a few things, you're looking to do something a bit more elaborate, but you don't want to commit to a massive elaborate project. Like, it feels quite elaborate, but it goes quite quickly. It's cute if you like the whole look of the Sophie scarf thing, but want something a bit more detailed. And would just not recommend superwash wool. And just brace yourself for suddenly when the pattern's maths doesn't match your maths. Because you can do it. Like, it is possible to just kind of like work it out. Been a bit of a journey over the last few months. I feel so much more confident. I have so many cable patterns now that I'm about to begin or half started or will do in a minute, and I'm showing some of them on screen now just to kind of give you an idea of the various things I want to attempt over the next few months. I do associate cable knitting with like the colder months, and it's starting to get really warm here, so I'm losing a little bit of my motivation to knit. And I do think that cable knitting is going to be definitely my kind of autumn winter fave. And at the minute, part of me is like, I just want to crochet, I want to try filet crochet and, you know, kind of do like summer garlands and things. It's like, no, I've spent all this time learning how to cable. I'm going to commit to finishing a few more things. But yeah, the fact that I even look at these patterns and feel like, yeah, I could do that, I feel confident. It's like, to me, that's a sign that all these free patterns worked for me, you know, and I learned some stuff and I had some bad moments and some good moments. And yeah, I would just recommend most of them if you're looking to cable yourself. All right, that's it from me. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do whatever you want. Bye.